I remember when I saw those two headlines some years ago. The first, from the Chronicle of Higher Education, was printed in 2001. I was so upset by that article, my entire department was upset. We discussed it at a departmental meeting. 6 years ago, the headline from Inside Higher Education, showed that the perception of what was happening with language learning at Drake really hadn't changed very much. So my article, The Drake Experiment, A Lesson in Curricular Design, attempts to look at what actually happened at Drake, rather than solely what was reported. And we ask the question if alternative models of curriculum can result in more proficiency for the students. I also take a look at whether or not members of higher education are ready for the radical kind of experiment that we tried at Drake. When David Maxwell came to Drake in 1999, the university, like many others, had lots of financial difficulties, and the language department at Drake was rated the lowest by both faculty and students. Ultimately, the department was disbanded by a vote of the faculty senate, 17 voting in favor of disbanding, 1 in opposition, and 2 abstentions. But many other departments were eliminated as well. Most of the reporting focused on only the language program, the language department. David Maxwell's original plan was to have an immersion experience for all students. Although that immersion experience at Drake would start in the 3rd year of instruction, there wouldn't be any 1st or 2nd year instruction. Students who needed that kind of instruction would study abroad, as would every language student at Drake. Those principles on which he founded that approach didn't actually play out in their entirety. The Drake University Language Acquisition Program is what resulted from that early planning between David Maxwell and the other language specialists at Drake. The basic tenets were to have classes of 4 or fewer, led by a conversation facilitator who was not to speak English and was not to explain grammar. That was left for the language instructors in those particular languages. Due to the restrictions of the Association of American University Professors, the program that followed the disbanded Modern Language Department couldn't look anything like the former one, or those former tenured faculty would have to be rehired. The language professors with PhDs who were hired at that time, beginning in 2002, had PhDs, but they could not be called faculty because of those restrictions, so we were hired as staff. The program included several common elements across the languages, including an electronic portfolio, a culture blog for each language, and other tenets from professional organizations on which the program was founded. There's no doubt that Drake had some success with its approach to languages, but it also definitely had challenges. We did do a quantitative study of how Drake students scored on the STAMP instrument, on a measurement of speaking and reading. We didn't do writing. We would have liked to, but we didn't have the funds at that time. What we found was that almost all of the students did as well or better than the national norms for those particular tests. The Keck Foundation gave the Council of Independent Colleges $360,000 to hold summer workshops, to invite other colleges and universities to learn about what was going on at Drake and see if they could use any of our approaches at their institutions. The Department of Defense was also very interested in what we were doing. They thought perhaps our model could help their soldiers learn languages better because of the shortage that they had. They provided Drake with $680,000 for studying in Chinese and Russian. There was a national network, actually an international network of colleges and universities that pursued those 2 languages at distance. The problems that we had at Drake with our language acquisition program were significant. The approach required students to be very independent learners. They didn't have daily assignments. They had an electronic portfolio to put together. They had a midterm and a final exam. Aside from that, they didn't have any indicators along the way of how well they were doing, other than meeting with the language professors to talk about their progress. The perceptions of students and parents also were that they were being taught by fellow students, which in large part was true. Drake's not a cheap, not an inexpensive university, and that's a legitimate concern, in my opinion. We also eventually became tenure track professors. There were problems with that that had been unanticipated. We didn't do student evaluations as the rest of the university did. We had quite a steep learning curve as we became tenure track. The faculty reaction, the non-language faculty reaction to DULAP at Drake was significantly negative, and that was a problem for us as well. As we move forward in restructuring, we're a lot more conventional than we used to be. We still do privilege speaking and culture above the other modalities, although we certainly hit on those as well. We didn't have any minors or majors in languages for 14 years. We now have minors in 8 different areas, and a Spanish major is in the planning. Our enrollments increased from 45 in 2005 to about 350 in 2018. We know that we have challenges ahead, as does the rest of higher education. We know the pool of available high school students is shrinking for the next several years. And as Drake is a private university, we're competing significantly with the state public institutions. But we're confident that we can learn from this. We hope the rest of language programs can learn a little bit from what happened at Drake and experiment with new approaches moving forward.